hit record and we will get started. Okay. Welcome everybody to the Navigating the Professional School Application Process webinar. My name is Julie Ammon Maddox and I'm the Assistant Director in the CLAS Academic Advising Center, and I have the pleasure of being on the pre-professional team in the office. I'd like my colleagues here to introduce themselves as well. So Alexis, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Alexis Shavy, also on the pre-professional team. I work with all of the professional areas, and specifically, I'm also the advisor for the pre-dental, pre-optometry, and the pre-pharmacy clubs.
Brian?
I'm Brian Eichenhout. I am also part of the pre-professional team. I work mostly with our pre-med students along with behavioral neuroscience, BMS, and psychology. And I also advised our pre-SOMA group, which is the DO.
And Danny.
Hey everyone, I'm Danny Lauer. I'm one of the advisors on pre-professional team as well. I also work with pre-med students and then similar majors to Brian. And I co-advise the pre-med club with Julie and also the pre-Chiro club.
All right, and as I said, I'm Julie, and I work with the same majors and programs as everyone else, except not exercise science. We leave that to Danny and Brian. I also advise the pre-med club with Danny, as she said, and the pre-MD PhD club. So thank you all so much for being here today. So we will get started. This presentation is all about the application to professional school. A lot of the examples we used will be centered a little bit more around like medical and dental school because we do committee letters for those professions, but so some of the examples used will be more geared toward that, but really this presentation is to cover all of the applications, optometry, podiatry, chiropractic, pharmacy, all of those different applications. So first and foremost, we are here to support you through this process. It's stressful, it's expensive, it's time consuming. So just know that you're not alone in this endeavor, that we are here to support you throughout. So we're going to be covering what it takes to be a successful candidate, the GVSU application file, what goes into that. That's our committee letter file, letters of evaluation, entrance exams, personal statements, primary apps, secondary apps, and interviews. So we'll take you all the way from the beginning to the end. Oh, and I just realized that I'm not screen sharing, so my apologies. Let me know if you all can see my screen here. We good? Okay.
Good.
All right. So there's lots of resources that you can use throughout this process. One is our advising center. So that is our pre-professional website right there. That's a direct link to it. We have, I'll bring up our pre-professional page here and show all of you, and I'll kind of go back and forth between the presentation and our website. Can you all see the website? Okay. So this is our pre-professional landing page here. We have lots of great resources on here for you, including our healthcare volunteering and experience. We even have a link for virtual opportunities. So definitely check that out if you're looking to broaden your healthcare experience. We have a really great newsletter, but right here is our committee letter process. That takes you to our Ready to Apply website. And so on this website, we have application process sheets for each profession. So I'm just going to click on the medicine one right now. This is a 4-page document that really spells out everything you need to know about the application process, from like how to register for your exam to what the applications are like, what's on the applications. There's a page about committee letters and letters of evaluation, and then a nice timeline for you as well. And I'm going through this really quickly, but we're going to break this down a lot more in depth as we go. We also have a new self-assessment form as part of our committee letter application. And again, we'll go into a little bit more depth here in just a moment. And we do personal statement reviews in our office. So we have a website that you can go and request, upload a copy of your draft and request that we review your personal statement. Um, we do we do have a lot of demands on our time, as you can imagine, as pre-professional advisors. So we do ask that you please meet with the Writing Center at least once before having your personal statement reviewed by one of us, and bring to us a draft after you've done some revisions for meeting with the Writing Center. We also have a YouTube channel that actually has a 3-part personal statement tutorial on it. So feel free to check that out. There's 3 parts to that personal statement tutorial. It'll give you some really good ideas on what to include in your personal statement, what not to include, some good examples in there for you as well. And then each of these applications are run by an entity, like the AAMC runs the AMCAS application for MD programs. AACOM runs the ACOMAS application, ADIA for ADSAS for dental. So these are going to be really great resources for you as well. Many of these have Twitter accounts that they will provide updates throughout the application cycle for you too. Okay. So let's kind of dive in now and talk about our committee letter application. You can find the committee letter application on our website. So where did my link go here? So again, back to this Ready to Apply website. The committee letter application link is right here, and there's a couple of notes down here. So we open our committee letter application on March 1st each year, and this year our deadline is August 2nd by midnight, before midnight. So just make sure that you have everything in by August 2nd, but we'll talk about deadlines in a little while. Deadlines are really just a way for us to end the process. We really want you to get things in way before that deadline. So as early as possible. Early as possible generally means late May, early June, when the applications are open for submission. If a student has graduated from Grand Valley and started a post-bac or graduate program at another school, they're no longer eligible to receive a committee letter from Grand Valley, but we do still do committee letters for students who have graduated and gone on to other programs. I'm sorry, who have graduated and not gone on to other programs. And then the committee letter self-assessment is something that we are requiring this year. So I'll just pull this up briefly so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so we are asking that you fill this out, and this is one of the first things you want to do in this whole process. So what this is meant to do is to help you self-assess and see kind of where you're at with the application. So we ask you to fill this out and then schedule an appointment with one of us, and we'll review this with you. And it's a way for us to kind of let you know kind of where you stand, kind of assess how competitive you might be, see where you would rank yourself overall as an applicant, and how that might match up with a committee letter. And so we're just hoping that this kind of gets the conversation started as to, are you ready to apply this year? Or if you waited another year, you know, how competitive you might be if you did X, Y, and Z to improve your application. Of course, you know, pre-professional students always think they could do more because that's just kind of your mentality, but um, there is a point at which you will be ready, and we want to just make sure that you're applying at the best time for you. So after you submit this self-assessment, we are able to access it, and after we meet with you, we'll send you a PDF of it because you have to upload that into your committee letter application. And I see some questions coming through the chat. We'll do our best to answer those in the chat, and then we'll also have time for questions at the end as well. All right, so let's get into the committee letter application here. So you'll log in with your network account, begin the application process. And the first time you log in here, you're going to encounter this waiver. We do recommend that you waive your rights to access your application file, including your committee letter. It just, it's what professional schools prefer, that you waive your rights. It legitimizes your committee letter and everything else. So that is what we recommend. Um, and then also application and personal statement use. This is a personal decision. If you would like us, if you would allow us to use your personal statement or application in the future for training purposes, you'll see in the personal statement tutorials on YouTube that we have provided some examples of great personal statements. So if we really like yours, we may use it as an example in the future. So I'm going to waive my rights and check both of these and click submit. And then it's going to bring you to the application. So this is what you'll see every time you log in after that initial waiver is completed. Here's where you're going to upload the self-assessment after you've completed it and met with an advisor, and then we'll send you the PDF to submit here. We also ask this year that you're going to calculate your GPA. So the GPA calculator is a spreadsheet that you can download. All right. And when you bring it up, I recommend that you have all of your transcripts handy. So not just your GVSU transcript, but any transcripts from other schools that you might have attended. Okay. So you're going to put the class in here. Like, let's say you took Bio 120, you got an A and it's 4 credits. Then you're going to go to your next class. Okay. And then over here, you'll start to see it's going to calculate your GPA. All right. And then you're going to do your BCPM, which is your biology, chemistry, physics, and math GPA. And you're going to go through again and pull out just those classes and put them in here. Make sure you read carefully all of these instructions. There's a link to the course classification guide if you're wondering what classes should count in your BCPM. And it's a little bit different for MD programs as opposed to DO. If you're only applying to DO or dental schools, you can use the ACOMA's GPA calculation. All right. Please wait for your winter grades to post before you do your GPA calc. We want to make sure that your current semester is reflected in there. Application. Okay, so we do need a copy of your AMCAS, ACOMAS, or ADSAS application when you have that complete. This is probably going to be one of the last things you're going to do because you can't finish those applications until May when they open, and you can't submit them until like late May, early June. So we want your final draft of that application to be uploaded here. So as soon as you finish those applications, you save them as a PDF and then you upload them in here. If you're applying to both MD and DO programs, you'll upload both your AMCAS and your ACOMAS applications in here. Profile. This is optional. So I believe that this pulls my name from Grand Valley. If you'd like to include a legal name, if that's different, feel free to do that. And then pronouns, and then also a headshot, if you'd like to include that. Again, that's optional, but it does help us to put faces with names. There is a questionnaire in here as well. The questionnaire is a little bit lengthy. Some of the questions are kind of carbon copies of what's on the self-assessment. So feel free if you want to copy and paste, that's totally fine. It's one of the places where you can do that, but it's going to ask questions like when you plan to take the DAT or MCAT. And then there's a bunch of other questions in here that we want you to complete. Letters of recommendation. So we get lots of questions about letters of recommendation, or some of those a little bit later in this presentation. But for the committee letter, you need to at least have 3 letters of recommendation submitted and a maximum of 5. To initiate your committee letter, you at least need 3. So make sure that you look at individual schools to see what they require. Our recommendation, just as a rule of thumb, it's good to have 2 faculty who have taught you in science courses, 1 faculty from a non-science course, and then a practicing clinician, like a physician or a dentist, somebody you've shadowed or gotten to know in a professional setting. I'm going to show you what that looks like, and I'm going to ask Alexis for a letter of recommendation. So Alexis is writing me a letter of recommendation for dental school. I'm going to put her name in here. Is that right? Alexis, okay. And for address, I get this question a lot. Do you need their home address? No, you don't. Just go ahead. If it's a Grand Valley person, just go ahead and put Grand Valley's address, which is One Campus Drive. And then whatever their office phone number is, you don't need like their personal cell phone number or anything like that. All right. So as soon as you hit save and send, it's going to send this person an email. Okay. Make sure that you have talked to the person first so they don't just get a random email asking them for a letter of recommendation. So I'm going to click save and send. Now it's going to send Alexis an email and I can track it in here. So I can see right now she has not yet submitted her letter of recommendation. I should probably give her more than 5 minutes to write that, right? But as soon as she does finish her letter of recommendation and upload it, you can see that in here. So it's kind of nice that you can track it. And let's say it's been 3 weeks and it's a little bit past the deadline and you want her to submit it. So you can resend the email so that she gets it again. All right, and so once you have completed all of these things, you'll have a box somewhere at the top to submit your application. So don't forget to do that last step so that we can see your application. So that is the committee letter application. So committee letters, we only write them for the regular cycle. We don't do them for early assurance. And the committee letter does include all of your individual letters attached to it. So a lot of students ask, well, are med schools going to see my letters? Yes, they will. We also don't pick and choose your best ones. So we will send every letter that's in your committee letter application to the professional schools, okay? We do, however, put them in order of strength. So we try to put like your best foot forward, your best references first, but we do include all of them. The committee letter itself includes a rubric and rankings, and they're based on the AAMC core competencies. So if you ever want to check that out, it's similar to what's in the committee letter self-assessment. Those are the types of things the committee letter is going to rank you on. And again, August 1st, I think it's August 2nd is our deadline this year. And then we can't start your application until we have a copy of your professional school application. Oh, and in the committee letter, we also do a narrative. So we may write a few paragraphs about you, kind of pulling out highlights from your application, what makes you unique, kind of explaining some of the rankings that we did give. All right. I think at this point, I turn it over to Alexis.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So let's keep going with a little bit more information on letters of evaluation. We also get that question a lot, who should write my letters? And Julie gave a sample of what a good packet of letters would be. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that we emphasize you should be asking people who know you well, just because they fit that formula of 2 science faculty, a non-science faculty. If you're reaching back several years to maybe a class that you took your freshman year and you haven't interacted with the professor at all, probably not the best person to ask. But if you took a class with a professor your freshman year and you've kept in contact, they know you well, you stop at office hours, that would be a great person to ask. They've seen you develop over your time at Grand Valley. So keep that in mind when you're asking people to write letters of evaluation for you. In addition to the faculty that Julie had mentioned, it's also important to make sure that those faculty have had you in class, because you are applying to professional school. So they will be speaking to your ability in the classroom, how you work with peers, the quality of your work. So it's really important to have that classroom perspective. It's also important to have that professional, whether that be a physician or a dentist or an optometrist, or say you work in as a nurse tech in the hospital, maybe you have a supervisor who has seen how you work with patients. So somebody that can speak to your work in that healthcare setting. And character references, those are another option that you would have. It could maybe be a research mentor or a coach, somebody who can speak to your work kind of in different settings than maybe the classroom or just the clinical experiences. It's also important, equally important, to know who not to ask. Very important not to ask family members. If your aunt is a dentist, you don't want your aunt writing you a letter of recommendation. Hopefully she would not, but it's just important to know not to even ask. We also occasionally have people who really focus on maybe somebody's title or their position at, say, a medical school or a dental school. You know, I know my neighbor's cousin's friend is the director of admissions at XYZ medical school. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't, again, you have to ask people who know you well, who can write you a strong letter of recommendation. And how recent they should be. That's another question we get. Ideally, letters are current within the last year. And if for our reapplicants who are watching this, if you have letters that you've used in a previous cycle and you would like to use some of those letters again, just reach out to us. There's a special process that we'll work with you on. But again, it's important to have updated letters, so you don't want to just reuse everything from a previous cycle. Next slide, please. And when do you need them? When do you need letters? It's good to give your evaluators a good notice. You know, about a month is a good time to ask for a letter of recommendation, give them enough time to be able to put together a quality letter or be able to meet with you if they've got questions about the letter. In the timing of what we're talking about with the committee letter application, end of May is a great time frame. That's when you can start submitting medical and dental applications. So it's ideal if you can have all of your letters of evaluation in by that time. So we're just waiting on your application. Some of the other professions that we work with, like veterinary, pharmacy, optometry, their application cycles open up a little bit later in the summer. And so you would not, you could be talking to them at this point about writing the letters, but not actually having them submit them till probably later in the summer. Information that's helpful to give to your evaluators. I recommend just kind of providing a packet without them even asking, if it has like a sample of a draft of your personal statement, if you're comfortable sharing that, a copy of your resume. You should always have a resume ready to go. And even if you're not applying to medical school, we really recommend the AAMC's guidelines for letter writers. It has those core competencies that we will be talking about addressing in our committee letters, but overall, it's just, they offer some really good resources to evaluators who maybe have never written a letter for somebody to professional school. So that's a great guide to offer as well. All right, next slide, please. And if you were curious what your evaluators will get so when Julie submitted my name, this is a template. It would be a little bit more personalized, but just so you know what your evaluators will get, it will have their name, it will have your name, who has requested the letter, it will specifically indicate medical or dental school, and it does indicate if you've waived your rights. So again, it goes back to, it's important to waive those so that your evaluators know that this is a confidential letter that they're writing. And then there's a link for them to upload the letter. And so that doesn't have to pass through your hands. It will be directly uploaded to our site. And then some guidelines too. Those guidelines for writing a strong letter and reminders to put them on letterhead and with a signature on there too. So just wanted to share what that would look like. And I will hand it over to Brian.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to go over the general timeline. So this particular timeline is for our pre-med students, but as Julie had mentioned on our Ready to Apply page, there is a timeline for each of the different professional programs. So I would recommend that you check that out. But for this particular one, it starts kind of that fall before you would be applying. So usually you're starting your MCAT study plan at some point during the fall semester and then looking to register for the MCAT. Registration usually opens in late October. And then we also recommend taking a practice MCAT exam. We have several opportunities available throughout the fall and the winter semester through our office, and then you can always find options for those as well. We also have you taking a look at doing your first draft of a personal statement. A lot of students, you know, this can be kind of a challenging thing to sort of talk about, why am I going into this particular field? So giving yourself several months and really several drafts to go through and complete this is really a good idea. You know, we will look at it, but you'll also want to have other people review it, and that often takes some time. Looking at that January through June, this is kind of where we start seeing more of that committee letter self-assessment, and then meeting with a pre-professional advisor. Always kind of keeping in mind, you know, March and through mid-April are kind of our busy times in terms of registration. So you'll want to kind of meet with us early on and get that appointment set up so that we can kind of help you assess where you might be in that process. You'll also want to continue working on that personal statement, and then also looking at your 15 experiences. So for our pre-med students, we get 15 buckets or experiences that you can talk about, and then you'll get a little bit more character limit to talk about 3 of the most meaningful with that. So you can start working on what those might sound like, so that when you're submitting your application later, you have a good idea what that looks like. You'll also start the committee letter application. We usually open that up around March 1st. And you can kind of work on that as you have some time. And then also, as Alexis was talking about with our letters of evaluation, you'll submit that through the CLA. But again, you want to give your letter writers several, whether it's a month or 2 in advance, just to make sure that they have adequate time to write you a good letter and have some time to reflect on that. March through May, you're going to continue to work on that committee letter application. It's probably not something that you're going to do in one sitting. So definitely just want to make sure that you're taking some time, you know, to plan for that. And then usually for the MCAT, we usually say you're taking that around March through, you know, maybe May or June, kind of depending on what that timeline looks like for you. We will have some application workshops. We typically have those usually in May to kind of help you look at your particular application and just make sure that you're kind of addressing questions the right way and addressing what your strengths are and sort of what you might bring to that particular school as well. May, June is kind of the hot spot for beginning work on the AMCAS or ACOMAS application. So you'll send all official transcripts to AMCAS or ACOMAS with a transcript request form, and then you'll submit ACOMAS in May and or AMCAS in June, and then load that submitted copy to the committee letter application. Again, that's for us to kind of review that so that we can write that letter a little bit later on. Keep in mind when you hit the submit button on that, they don't see your application right away. There's that verification period that they go through to check your GPA and look at different things within your application. June and later, the committee letter is initiated after the complete committee letter application is received. And then you'll start working on secondary applications, looking at each individual school deadlines. A lot of students get caught up on, I've done kind of the basic thing for the application service, but then sometimes forgetting, hey, I've got certain things for different schools that I need to also complete. And then kind of towards the end, it's always ingrained in my head that August 1st is the deadline, but I think that's a Sunday this year. So August 2nd is the deadline for that. You'll have ample time in the fall for our interview prep workshop and the mock MMI that we put on, so that when you're doing interviews, typically we see a lot of students do interviews September, October, November. You'll have some practice before you actually go through and do that. And then October 15th is the first day to receive offers of admission from MD schools. So again, this is for our med students. Take a look at some of the other ones for the other professional programs. And then going on to the next slide, this is just kind of a basic overview of some of the other application cycle timelines. So again, AMCAS, they open May 3rd. The first day to submit is May 27th. And then the first date applications are sent to the MD schools is June 25th. ACOMAS opens May 4th, a day later, but you can submit anytime. And then the first date apps are sent to the DO schools is June 15th. So for those of you that might be applying to both of those, that's important to kind of keep track of those different dates. ADSAS, which is our pre-dental, opens May 11th. And then the first date to submit is June 1st. And then for optometry, it opens late June, early July. Those dates haven't been released yet, along with podiatry, which is a little bit down there, but usually that's July or August. For PharmCAS, it's July 14th. And then for veterinary, it's January 21st, it already opened. And then the first date to submit is May 12th. And then the deadline is September 15th at 11:59. So now I just want to show you, this is, again, we do use quite a few like med school examples, because it does a good job of showing you the importance of applying early to the program. So this is U of M's med school. These are 5-year averages, but kind of looking at the applications received. If you look at June, July, they had a little over 4,800 received then, and then it goes down a little bit. August had about 1,700, September 600, and then it goes down pretty significantly after that. In June, July, the interviews scheduled 429, and then it dropped considerably in August to 48. And then after that, much fewer interviews scheduled at that point. And then for admission offers, June, July starts up there at 324. August is already down to 33. And then again, it's much lower as you go further on in the process. So we saw a website within the last couple months that sort of talks about this. How do we redefine the word deadline? But the main thing is to kind of keep in mind that your chances go down significantly the longer you wait. So to sort of put a feeling for it, June 15th is considered our bruised line, where submitting your application by that date won't ruin your chances, but it does mean your application is behind the thousands who submit the first days that the application opens. So that's, May 27th. July 1st is our wounded line. So applying by this date certainly hurts, but it still might make sense as long as your numbers are strong. So the example here is, you can take a wound and still survive and still potentially get in. And then the damned line is August 1st. So it's not impossible to get in, but it does significantly hurt your chances of getting in. And then September through December is typically when a lot of the deadlines are, but things would look pretty bleak at that particular point, just based off of, if students have already been, accepted earlier on in that process.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself there. Okay, so what to expect on the applications. Over on the left here, you can see just a sample of what the AMCAS application, their landing page looks like. So when you log in, it's kind of their dashboard where you can see each section and what you've completed. As you can see, this is what it looks like when you first log in. Everything is incomplete, but you'll have identifying information, schools attended, biographic information, coursework, activities, letters of eval. By the way, in the applications themselves, under the letters of evaluation section, you're only going to put my name and my email address, and then I'll be submitting a committee letter. Okay. You're not going to put in your individual letter writers into the AMCAS, ACOMAS, or ADSAS applications, because then they'll just get two different requests, one from our committee letter app and one from the application. They only send it once to the committee letter app, and then you only put my name in as the letter writer for the committee letter. And then there's a spot for medical schools. So that's where you're going to select the schools that you're applying to. Essays, that includes personal statement. There might be some other essays too that we'll talk about in a minute. And then standardized tests. So I do get the question, well, what if I haven't taken my MCAT yet? You can put your future date in here, and then schools will see the scores once they're loaded. Okay. There's very few things that you can alter or change after you submit your application, but you can go in and add a future MCAT date. Like if you got your score back and you weren't satisfied and you wanted to reschedule a retake, then you can put a future date in there if you'd like. All right, and then on the right-hand side here is what all the other applications look like. They all use a service called Liaison for their application. So ACOMAS, ADSAS, FarmCAS, all of those other applications look like this with the 4 quadrants. So you have your personal information. Again, that's like your identifying information, academic history. That's where you're going to put in every course you've taken. That's the coursework section in AMCAS as well. So again, you want to have all your transcripts handy. You're going to put in every course you've taken, your grades, um, all of that from every school attended. And then you're going to send your transcripts to this application, and they're going to verify what you entered. I do want to let you know that I believe all of these applications do accept our e-transcript service through Grand Valley. So when you log into Banner, you can select to send an electronic transcript. Once you do that, you can select that you're applying to graduate school or professional school. I think it says graduate school. And it does allow you to select AMCAS, ACOMAS, ADSAS, and then you can have your transcripts electronically sent. You can do that as soon as the application's open. And I encourage you to send your transcripts as soon as possible, like one of the first things that you do once you start your application. You just don't want them waiting on your transcripts to be holding up your application in any way. Also, in some of the applications like the ACOMAS and ADSAS, you can pay an additional fee and have them enter your coursework for you. It's up to you if you want to do that. I personally like to have control over things, and I would want to put it in myself just to make sure that it's all accurate. It does sometimes delay your application a little bit. So if you want to save time and money, if it were me, I'd probably just enter it myself, but you can pay to have them do that. We get lots of questions surrounding transcripts. So just, let us know if you do have any questions when you're filling out the application, but the easiest way to do it is to do the electronic transcript. Supporting information, excuse me, that's going to include your essay, like your personal statement and your experiences. And then program materials, that's a page where it's going to show all of the schools that you're applying to. And each school has a page. Some of them have supplemental application questions right in there. Some of them just have you take you to their website and you pay a fee, their application fee and things like that. So make sure that you go through all the program materials and you do whatever the school is asking you to do in the application. Sometimes they're asking you to match up your courses with prereqs at that institution. That's a little bit more robust, I would say, in the ACOMAS and ADSAS applications. In the AMCAS app, you don't do your secondary apps in there. Those are going to come later to your inbox from the individual schools that you applied to. All right. Sorry, guys, I lost my PowerPoint. Here we go. So COVID-19 and the 2022 application, it was interesting. We were looking back at last year when we did this, and we still didn't expect that we'd still be here today, all working from home, but that's what it's been like. So um, hopefully this doesn't happen, but tests could be your standardized tests like your MCAT or DAT. It's possible that they could be canceled or delayed or rescheduled, just depending on the state requirements. But most these test centers are really good right now at making sure that you're socially distanced, requiring certain masks. Um, so make sure that you do know your requirements on test day. If you're required to wear a mask, what type of mask, um, things like that. And a lot of these tests are waiving cancellation or reschedule fees right now as well. I know MCAT is. So if you got sick right before your test date, you could reschedule your exam for no fee currently. Make sure that you know the credit, no credit policies. Grand Valley, we did have that one semester last winter where we did allow for credit, no credit kind of later in the term because we had to quickly move to online. Most schools are being a little bit more, accepting of that right now, but make sure that you're looking at the information from each school you're interested in. And we do try to keep that updated on our website as well, but it's good to go right to the source as well for the schools you're interested in. The AAMC and ADIA both have COVID-19 websites that will give you more information on like the policies and things that are going on related to COVID. And again, check their Twitter pages because that's where they're going to let students know. I mean, they'll email you too, but if they're canceling exams or if applications are getting delayed for COVID reasons or things like that, they will keep everybody updated via Twitter. Some apps have optional COVID related questions, like the ADSAS application, I believe, has one. The ACOMAS does as well. I believe optometry may. So it's going to ask how has COVID affected you personally, professionally, and or academically? And this is a way to, explain, I had all this shadowing set up, but it all got canceled, or, um, I got sick with COVID and I didn't do as well in my organic chemistry classes I had hoped to. So there are different things you can different ways you can talk about that in your application. Currently, the AMCAS MD application does not have a COVID-related question, but many of the secondary applications will. We're also noticing that most schools are continuing with virtual interviews this year, this upcoming year. Most schools did do virtual interviewing over the past year, and so we are seeing those continue. So you can expect that you may be sitting just like this, doing an interview this fall for your professional school. And I believe a question came up in the chat with COVID precautions. What's the best way to contact professors to ask about letters of evaluation? Email, give them a call. Some professors have their office hours, their virtual office hours posted on their website. If you go to the Grand Valley homepage, you should be able to find professors like their page where they have their picture and their information, how to get in touch with them. See if they would want to schedule a Zoom meeting with you if you want to talk to them about it. That's probably the best way to do it right now. All right. right, and then I'll turn it over to Alexis for personal statements.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit from applications and letters of evaluation, we're going to talk more about the other written parts of your application, personal statement and experiences. One great resource that Grand Valley offers is the Writing Center. So the Writing Center has consultants who are familiar with reviewing personal statements, with helping students draft them kind of at any point you are in the drafting process, whether it's the early brainstorming or at the end with more of polishing and proofreading. So definitely use them. And we mentioned earlier, we do also review those. We would prefer to get one after the Writing Center has reviewed it, because they are looking for grammar and other rules of writing. We're looking more at the content. So we recommend having you work with them first. Also have people who know you well read them. Have your mom, have your best friend read it, and have them give you a little check to see if the person that they're reading about in the personal statement is actually the person that they know. That's important, because when schools actually have you come to the interview, they also want to meet the person that was in the personal statement. So you want to make sure that you're being genuine and you're really telling who you are. Some of the other good kind of tips and tricks that you might have learned in Writing 150, as you're proofreading your statement, read it out loud. If you read it out loud, you can kind of catch some of those own errors that you might miss if you're reviewing it in your head. Going backwards, so if you're really looking at kind of like a detailed proofread, start at the end and work backwards. You can kind of catch some of the other grammar errors that you might have made. There's a saying with personal statements, show, don't tell. And what does that actually mean? We say it all the time when we're reviewing statements. And I would say maybe a good example of this, we'll have students talk about trying to highlight certain attributes in their personal statement, like I'm great at working with team members. I am a really compassionate person. I work in a clinical setting and I demonstrate empathy. Don't tell us that you do that. Use an example to help give that some life. Give us an example that shows how are you a critical thinker? If you are a nurse tech and let's say you have a really challenging patient and somebody that maybe nobody else on the staff connects with, how did you go above and beyond and really connect with that person and demonstrate compassion? So use those stories to show what you're trying to illustrate the personal statement. Character limit is really important. 5,300 characters on the MD/DO applications, 4,500 characters on most of the others. And that is with spaces. That is not a fun thing to come across as you're nearing the end of the drafting and figuring out that you are well over because you thought it was characters without spaces. And copy and pasting is important. If you're copying and pasting from, say, a Word document or a Google document, there's some formatting when you put those into the actual application systems. So you want to use either like a WordPad or Notepad, and those will transfer over a little bit easier into the actual application systems. There's a question, I see a question, Kayla, about the Writing Center. If I remember right, they usually take a break between academic semesters, but they are open year-round. More about the personal statements, things to do, things not to do. Again, our YouTube tutorial that Julie mentioned at the beginning, that 3-part series, that's really helpful if you're just getting started with this. And it kind of walks you through very early examples of strong statements and some things not to do as well. But just to touch on a few more of them, start with an interesting story. Personal statements are really fun to read when they really hook the reader and they kind of bring you into the story, help set the stage. A couple examples might be, the smell of breakfast filled the room as my dad and I sat at the breakfast counter. You're just sort of diving right into the story. Or despite the dimly lit room, I could see people whose lives had been plagued with addiction, something that just really draws you in right away. So it's very different than, say, a traditional academic research paper that you might be writing. You can stick with kind of the structure, the overall structure is sort of a 5-paragraph structure, an introduction that has that hook that sets the stage for the rest of the paper. 3 paragraphs, each paragraph can highlight a different attribute. And again, you're using examples to show that. And then a really strong conclusion to kind of tie it all together and really that selling point of why you would be a good candidate for professional school. Remember to answer the question. So all of these application systems really want to know, why do you want to be a dentist? Why do you want to be a physician? So make sure that you're answering the question and not writing your memoir and giving your whole life story. You really want to focus on, what is it about this career path that drew you in and why would you be a good fit? Some things to not do, not to make it too gimmicky. Sometimes if you get hung up on a theme, it starts to become burdensome to stick with it, and it actually can be quite distracting when you're reading it. Not always. So that's something that we would maybe give some feedback on, if a theme is really working for you or if it's worthwhile to maybe let that go. Simply walking through your experiences. Remember, you're going to have that experience section. Brian mentioned that there's 15 buckets that you have on those AMCAS applications. You don't want your personal statement to be a complete redo of all of those. You want your personal statement to tell things about your story that are nowhere else in the application system. So this is really a way that you can kind of dive deeper because you have more character space to do that. You don't want to have a negative tone. It's okay to talk about negative things that have maybe happened in your life, but you really want to show maybe some positive outcomes or how you were resilient despite the circumstances. And another one not to do is focus on your own philosophies without explaining why. A good example might be, as somebody who's going into healthcare, you probably are well aware that there are healthcare disparities out there, but speak to how you've come to learn that, how you've gained that understanding in your own context, in your own experiences, rather than just something that you've heard about. Okay, next slide. In the experience section. So again, we review those, as does the Writing Center. So it's good to polish these up just as much, put as much work into these as you would into the personal statement. Again, sometimes I recommend maybe writing some of these earlier before you get too far into the personal statement, because then you have a good understanding of what's going to be in the experience section versus the personal statement. Those buckets or those experience sections are very short, 700 characters with spaces for AMCAS. And if you mark those as most meaningful, you get an additional 1,350 characters. And all the other applications have 600 characters. So it doesn't give you a whole lot of space to write about. What you want to make sure that you're focusing on are not just walking through what you did. If you're a scribe, medical schools know what medical scribes do. If you are a nurse tech, that's kind of it's understood what you do in those roles. You want to talk more about the reflection. What did you learn about that being in that position? How did it inform you about the profession that you're going in? So it's really that reflection piece that's important here to use that space. Sometimes I talk with students and don't think that they should be putting non-clinical experiences on there, whether it be volunteer, or maybe you've worked in the restaurant industry, or something that's not in healthcare and they don't think it relates. But I think it's really important to focus on the transferable skills. There are things that you've learned in terms of customer service, working as a wait staff member, and how to work with people who are different than you. And those are things that you can draw some of those connections to. The other thing is, if you don't tell schools about it, if you work 2 jobs and you are also going to school full time and you're not telling them, they don't know that. So it's helpful to help them see how you spent your time and how you managed your time and everything that you did out of the classroom. Include all extracurriculars, volunteer experience, research, and again, really painting a good picture of what you did out of the classroom and accurately. So you need to make sure you don't inflate the hours. That can put some red flags up, but just make sure you're accurately estimating how much you truly did. And each application system does that a little bit differently. Anything else here? In the don't section, make sure that you're focusing on things that are recent and relevant. We don't want students to go back to high school and talk about experiences there. In fact, that can really weaken an application. The things you did in high school built you up to be an applicant in college, or to get you into college. And the things you're doing in college and after are the things that are getting you to professional school. Don't put too many of your future projected hours. Depending on your application system that you're using, you can really distinguish hours that have been completed already. And if it's something that you're going to continue, like a volunteer experience that you're going to continue to be involved in, there's a way to report out future hours there. Okay, that is it for that. Thank you. And then selecting programs. So this is another major task involved with applying to professional school. Where are you going to apply to? So we always say you should definitely do your research, and some ways to do that are using some of the systems that we have pictured on screen here. So the AAMC has the medical school admission requirements page, which is also known as the MSAR. DO applications have the Choose DO Explorer. Dental applications have a dental school explorer. PharmCast, if you're applying to pharmacy schools, there's the PharmCast directory, optometry directory, and so on. So there's places that you can go that you can see a list of schools that are out there. And then with those particular applications on screen there, you can filter them and see based on geographical region, based on your test score, your MCAT or your DAT, your GPA. So you can start to see if you're a good fit in terms of an academic profile. A really important piece to consider is only apply to places that you would go to if you got an offer of admission. If you're applying to 20 medical schools, anticipate that you might get 20 secondary applications. You know, are you going to have the time to be able to fill out all of those? If not, you're just really throwing money away at that application. And if it came down to you were able to interview there and they gave you a spot, would you go? So really give that some consideration as you're picking your schools. How many schools to apply to? I think the average I heard last, 12 to 15 schools was about the average for medical school, about 8 to 10 for dental. This last year, we saw some interesting trends because applicants knew interviews were going to be virtual. There were potentially more kind of changing your budget from what was going to be travel budget and putting that into applying to some additional schools. Another thing to think about is tracking your progress. So keep a list of where you're applying, keeping track of what additional deadlines you have, particularly when it comes to those secondaries, keeping track of what they need from you so you're turning things in a timely manner. We recommend about a 1 to 2 week response when you get those secondary questions. Schools really do look into how quickly you're responding to those. So that tells them maybe how truly excited you are to go there. As well as with the secondaries, you want to make sure it's not a copy and paste and just a generic response. You want to make sure that you're really putting the time in to talk about why you would be a good fit at that particular school. And then the last thing to focus on here, we do, as a pre-health advising office, we do get some discounted products through the AAMC. And so there's a link there to our payment system, and you can get the MSAR at a reduced rate. I think you can get it for about $25 with our discount. The Choose DO Explorer is free, and the Dental School Explorer is also around that $25, $30, so fairly affordable. Okay, and then just a couple things regarding other responsibilities that you have as professional school applicants. The CASPER test, I'm sure many of you have heard about it. CASPER is a situational judgment test, and this is starting to gain some traction a couple years ago, particularly with medical schools, and it's really grown. We're seeing PA schools use it, other professions are using it, but it's another way for schools to really focus on what are some of those soft skills that you bring as an applicant that they may not be able to gain from just reading a written application. So what the CASPER application does, I'll talk a little bit about CASPER, and then we'll talk about some of the other new ones that are starting to show up. It's a written, sorry, let me back up. The situational judgment test, that Casper uses, it's a written exam. So when you take this, it's about a 60 to 90 minute written exam, and you're given 12 different prompts. And these prompts are to help maybe focus on your critical thinking, your ethical decision making. You have about 5 minutes to respond to those, and you have 3 prompts to address for each of those sections. So that's how Casper works. And if you take it once in a cycle, that's all you need to take. That's all you need to do, and then you can send the findings to any schools that needed it. Last year, I know the University of Michigan required it. Michigan State University's College of Human Medicine used it. And we started to see more and more schools using things like this because of COVID. If you can change to the next slide, Julie, there's a couple other ones that we saw last year. Casper also developed a snapshot, which is more of not a written situational judgment test. It's a video situational judgment test where you record your answers and submit those. Kira Talent is one. A lot of dental schools use it, but it's a way for the schools themselves to ask particular questions. They're not template questions. They are ones that they're questions that they have developed that they're asking of applicants. And then AAMC has also developed a couple of video interviewing platforms and their own situational judgment test. So really what the takeaway is you need to be aware of what schools are asking of you and what the deadlines are to make sure that you're not being ruled out as an applicant because you missed completing one of these additional requirements. It is also important to note if you did some of these last year, depending on the platform you were using, you might need to retake them again. Those scores might not transfer over.
All right, thanks, Alexis. That's really great advice to know what the schools are requiring of you and what their deadlines are. I also want to point out that, schools have told us before that if it takes somebody like a month or longer to complete their secondary application, that can be seen as, well, we must not be their top choice since they're not putting us as a priority right now to fill out their secondary application. And so just make sure that you're, not rushing things, but you're putting time into it, and keeping on top of things to show that you really want that spot. All right, we're gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about GPA, and we just have a couple of slides left, so bear with us. But it's important to know the GPA calculation rules for your application. Most applications are gonna count every attempt of a repeated course in your GPA, except optometry. I think optometry might count the more recent attempt of a course in your GPA. And then they also count every course from every higher ed institution. So if you've repeated a course or if you've taken courses at another school, your Grand Valley GPA is not going to be the same as your application GPA because they're going to calculate in those other grades. This is actually a table, a chart that shows what the AMCAS GPAs look like when schools are looking at them. I always think this is a strange example to show because the student doesn't have a junior year GPA, which you wouldn't normally see that. But they do see, and I don't know why high school is included there because you don't need to send your high school transcripts, but they do see the BCPM, all other, and then total GPAs, and then how many credits you have in each of those. And then they break it down by freshman year, sophomore, junior, senior. Also, if you are a post-bac student or a graduate student, they list those GPAs separately. So they show a cumulative undergrad, but then they also have a separate line for the post-bac undergrad. And that's really important if you're a post-bac or a graduate student, because a lot of schools will look at that pretty heavily if you have a significant number of credits, like 20, 24 or more credits. Some even will tell you that they will look at that as a fresh start. So that is one way. If your undergraduate GPA might be not as competitive, a lot of students do go on to like that post-bac or master's program so that they can work on that GPA and enhance their records to put forth a stronger application. And again, we have our GPA calculator, which you can find in the committee letter application, and it's on our website as well if you need help calculating your GPA. Do great on the MCAT, DAT, GRE, whatever test you're taking. Make sure that you're preparing. We do have our test prep course winter semester. We actually just wrapped that up for the winter semester this year. We typically do that Thursdays 6 to 9 p.m. So if you're not applying this year, but you're planning to apply next year, make sure that you're leaving Thursday evenings free in your schedule for our test prep course. And we'll open up registration for that usually around Thanksgiving, around late November. We do have a test prep course interest form on our website. So if you'd like to be added to that, you can put that in the chat or email one of us. But I also believe it's on our website under our test prep course page. And you can certainly, do a test prep companies test prep course, Kaplan, Princeton Review. These are just some popular ones. We should have Kaplan scholarships again this year that we give away, so watch for that if you're applying next year. Alexis put that test prep course information in the chat. Thank you. So watch for that next fall. We will let you know about the Kaplan scholarship application through our office. Kaplan's really generous to give health professions advisors scholarships to give away, and we try to give those to students who need them and who could use them. UWorld, Alexis and I had a demonstration of that earlier in the year, and that's a pretty cool resource as well. It's very focused on test prep. And so that's just another resource that you could use. We also have Reddit on here and Student Doctor Network. A lot of you are familiar with Reddit, and you may be familiar with Student Doctor Network. These are forums that a lot of pre-professional students use to share information. So some of the information you do have to take it with a grain of salt and be a little wary of it, but a lot of information is really great. Like I had one student tell me that somebody posted all of their AP psychology notes on Reddit, and that's what they studied for the psychology section on the MCAT, and they pretty much aced that section. So there is some really good information out there. I'm sure TikTok might have some things out there. I don't know. I haven't delved that deep into that yet, but feel free to check out what's out there for free. All right. My apologies. My Amazon device just started talking in the middle of that. So, and again, we are here as a resource for you all. So make sure that you connect with us. We're here to help you. We're doing virtual advising appointments right now, and we will be available all summer as well. Make sure that you do schedule your self-assessment review session on May 5th or 6th. If you can't make it on one of those dates, you can schedule with one of us through Navigate. But we're doing a special registration for the 5th and 6th dates for the self-assessment review. And there is a Sign Up Genius form to fill out for that. So now I think that's about all we had. Danny, I can turn it over to you. Danny's going to run our question and answer portion. So if you have questions for us, please drop them in the chat.
Yeah, so we do have one that came in. I think just one. The other ones that came in throughout you have answered already. But we had a question about including AP grades from high school if the student didn't take the equivalent class in college. Is that necessary to do?
Yes, it is. So you want to include anything that's going to show up on your transcript. So if you look at your unofficial transcript from Grand Valley, you'll see your AP scores. Well, I guess, okay, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, you would not include your AP grades from high school. You would, however, include the AP credit that you received at Grand Valley, if that makes sense. So yeah, so basically, let's say you took AP Bio, and you got a 3, and that gave you credit in Bio 120 at Grand Valley. You would put Bio 120 on your application, and I think there's a way to indicate a credit instead of a letter grade. And so that's what you would indicate on there. And AP scores do not count towards your GPA.
That's helpful. Feel free. I think we have a smaller group. Oh, the student asked, does that look worse?
No, not at all.
I think it's pretty normal too. A lot of students come in with AP scores and credits, so it's pretty standard.
Mhm.
Can I add a question
Mhm.
that I realized I forgot to cover? When talking about letters of evaluation, another common question we get is, I I need to have my letters of evaluation submitted in the application before I can submit my application. And that is not true. If sometimes it's confusing if you're doing a committee letter because we need your application to actually write the committee letter. And if you're not doing a committee letter, you can still submit your application just by having inputted the evaluator's information. So those committee letters, letters of evaluation, all of those are uploaded several weeks after your application is actually submitted.
Yeah. They're really more part of the secondary application process than the primary application. Great point there, Alexis.
If there are questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself or drop a question in the chat, and we're happy to answer anything.
I have a question about the letter of recommendations.
Mhm.
So I just realized that all of the professors that I inputted in there, one of them didn't actually have me in class, but he was my research. Should I still find a different professor for one of my science classes then?
I think it's fine to have somebody from research, especially if it was a significant research experience. You just would also want somebody who has had you in class. So,
Okay, because
yeah.
I definitely have another science professor in there who has had me in class, so I just didn't know if I should find another one because that's what you guys recommend.
If you're going to be within the 3 to 5 letters, asking one more person, and if you think the person would write you a strong letter of recommendation, then it may be good to ask another person.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question about the 15 types of experience that you put in. Is that the maximum amount, or should we have around that many types of experience?
That's the maximum amount. So we definitely see students who don't have all of that filled in. So if you, that's part of why we are requiring the self-assessment this year, is so that we can walk through your application with you and talk to you about, how much experience do you have? Is it going to be a competitive amount? That kind of thing. So that's one reason why we're doing the self-assessment this year. So, I mean, you definitely don't want to have 6 good experiences and then the rest are maybe from high school, or maybe you put that you like to golf in there or something like that. But you want them to be relevant and recent, like Alexis said. Um, maybe if you were a golf champion and you're well known for that, or you play on the golf team at Grand Valley or something, then that would be a reason to put that as an experience. So yeah, those are the types of things that we can kind of walk through with you and help you determine, what to put on your application and what not to.
I want to add to that. AMCAS has the max limit of 15. The other applications systems, you can put more, but I recommend 15 is a good gauge. Having 30 experiences gets to be a little much. So maybe that 12 to 15 for those other applications.
Any other questions for us while we're still recording?
Can we review the part where you talked about only putting, or Julie, where we only put your email address in for the committee letter?
Yes. So when you get to the part of your application that asks for your letters of evaluation, you have the option of either putting in your individual letter writers, which you don't want to do that, or you can select committee letter and put a person's name and email in. And honestly, you could put any of ours. I kind of coordinate that process, so that's why it's easier if it's all under my name. So Alexis, I believe, is pulling up what it looks like in the AMCAS application. So you can add a letter of evaluation, and you would select committee letter, and then letter title, you can just call it committee letter or GVSU committee letter. Select school, yep, and then this is where you put all my contact information in. And once you've filled in all of the information, you would save it. And then you can assign it to each school you've applied to. So don't miss that part. And this is in the AMCAS application. It looks a little bit different in the ACOMAS and ADSAS applications. So there's a question in the chat. If I already asked all of my letter writers to write letters for me, should I send them the link to submit it soon or wait until the application opens? So actually you would go into the committee letter application and you would request your letters in there, and you can do that now. Okay. So then on our end, when we write your committee letter, we download those letters that you had sent to the committee letter application. And then we attach them to your committee letter, and we make one big PDF with all of those letters, and we upload it into the application. And that's, we put that into the ADSAS, ACOMAS, or AMCAS applications. So I hope that makes sense and it explains that. All right, other questions?
This is kind of a specific question,
Sure.
but related to the letter of recommendation from the clinical experience. Would it be better to have a physician write it who you've shadowed a few times, or would it be better to have someone who you've worked in the clinical setting with that might not be a physician but has kind of known you for quite a few months now?
I would say, again, you want to pick the person who knows you the best, but I would kind of like to see both of those letters, honestly. If you're still within like the 3 to 5 letters, um, I think that would be fine to include both of those people, because one, has the credentials that you're trying to get eventually, and they could speak to their profession and how they would see you as a fit for their profession. And the other could speak to your patient care experience and how you work on a healthcare team. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. The type of letter that we usually don't recommend getting is, say my neighbor is a doctor and I babysat their kids and they know me personally, and that might not be the best letter. It's a little bit better if a person can, address, maybe that person personally, but then you have also shadowed them, then that would be fine. But you just don't want the people reading it to think that this person is biased in any way towards you, or that they don't really know you in a professional setting. Other questions? Okay, well, I think we can stop the recording now and we'll kind of hang out